Welcome back to Run the League. I'm Grayson Grunefer, and today we are talking about sell high candidates for Dynasty football season going into the 2022 NFL season. Let's get it rolling. All right, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are talking about sell high candidates for Dynasty football for next year. It was a great season, honestly, for fantasy football in general. And honestly, remember when I talk about these guys, I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm not saying that, they're done. But what I am saying is now is the time to capitalize on the value that you have on your Dynasty roster. So the first one is Jalen Hurts, the quarterback for the Philadelphia Eagles. So he's such an interesting quarterback in just many aspects. So the first reason I say he's interesting is because he nearly got benched during the middle of the season. I mean, there were reports that Gardner Minshew was getting ready to possibly take a start from Jalen Hurts. He got injured late in the year, which led to some criticism as well. And the craziest part about Jalen Hurts was when he was playing his best fantasy football is when he was getting talked the worst about. That's when all the rumors started swirling. And then in their final, 8 games, he started to get things on track as far as the Eagles actually winning football games. So it really is an interesting conundrum that everyone has about Jalen Hurts, because when he's playing really well for fantasy, his team's really bad. And when he's playing really bad for fantasy, his team's really good. So what do you do with Jalen Hurts? So to break that down even more specifically, the first 7 games of the season this year, the NFL season, he was inside the top 10 in all 7 of them. He was a top 10 quarterback. He was legit a top 5 quarterback overall through the first 7 games. He was so good. And honestly, everyone was so excited about him, but the Eagles weren't winning football games. So things turned in the final 8 games as he only had 3 top 10 finishes in the final 8, and he had 3 finishes outside the top 20. That is bad. That will lose you weeks in fantasy football when you have a quarterback who's not even in the top half of the NFL. He just wasn't good for fantasy towards the end of the season. So now you're seeing here he was 8th overall, 9th in points per game. So those numbers look good. Those numbers look like a guy who in year 2, he took a step in the right direction. But the problem is it's deceptive, because over the last 8 games, he just was simply not that. And now you're in a position where in order for him to show value, he's going to have to score 10-plus rushing touchdowns per year. He had 10 this year. And so now you're seeing a ceiling, right? Because you're seeing 8th overall with 10 rushing touchdowns. So what if he has 6 rushing touchdowns next year? He's probably going to finish more like QB 13 or 14, which honestly is not capitalizing on his value. If you can get a first-round pick for him, I would go ahead and do that right now. I think it's only a matter of time before the Eagles bring in more competition to kind of push him a little bit more. And I also think this is a team that truly wants to run the football a ton. They want to hand the ball off. And yes, they want him to run the ball as well. But I don't know if that's sustainable in Dynasty, especially when you're talking about a guy who just is not putting up prolific passing numbers. My second sell high candidate is also at the quarterback position. And once again, this quarterback is really good, and you should only sell him if you can get top value for him. And that quarterback's Joe Burrow. And he has been unbelievable. And we've seen it over the course of the playoffs. He's got the Bengals in the Super Bowl. There's no denying the talent. But what I look at is the facts, right? So the first 15 weeks of the year, he had 3 top 10 finishes. 15 weeks, 3 top 10 finishes. That is not good at all. That is simply not getting it done. And it's because the Bengals wanted to run the football. His passing numbers were low because he wasn't throwing it a ton. And obviously, those factors really played into things for him this year. And so now you sit back and go, okay, which quarterback and which system is he going to have going forward in Cincinnati? Because the final 2 weeks of the season, he was the quarterback 1 overall. And then, of course, in the playoffs, he's been throwing it a ton and having a lot of success. So I guess that's my question is he really going to be the quarterback he was over the final month of the entire NFL season, or who he was over the first 3 months of the entire NFL season? That's the problem. So if you can cash in right now, which I think you can because it seems like everyone is on the Joe Burrow hype train, which they should be. He's a great quarterback, but now's the time to capitalize. If I could get a first and Stafford in a one quarterback league, I would. In Superflex, you'd need a lot more, obviously, because Burrow's young and the value is much higher in a Superflex league at the quarterback position. Moving on to Ezekiel Elliott, the running back for the Dallas Cowboys. RB6 on the season. That sounds like a great number. That sounds like a guy who was just, killing it. And I know I texted one of my buddies about a trade and kind of in regards to Ezekiel Elliott's season, and he told me, well, he finished RB6 on the season. Well, once again, I said that's misleading because it absolutely is. Zeke was RB18 in per game numbers, and he only had four top 10 finishes in the first 5 weeks of the year. So first 5 weeks, he was terrific, absolutely outstanding, but he only had 3 in the final 12 games. So he really took a step back. He was dealing with injuries. He looked slow. He looked banged up. And I don't know if that gets corrected a whole year from now as Zeke is getting up there in age. Like I said, RB18 on average. So if you can sell him at that RB6 value, which is what technically overall he was at, I would absolutely do that. I think you're going to get a steal. And with the way running backs are valued, I think you could get a younger running back for Ezekiel Elliott. Like, if you could trade Zeke for Elijah Mitchell, I would do that right now. You might find a guy who does not really like Elijah Mitchell or doesn't think that he'll be the starting running back in San Francisco, and I would go ahead and make that trade because you're getting back essentially 4 years because Zeke is about to turn 27 and Elijah Mitchell is 23 years old. Moving on to the next target, and you're going to see a consistent theme here. These are guys who really, whether it's Joe Burrow or Gabriel Davis, who I'm about to talk about, or Deebo Samuel, who will be the next guy, I just think these are guys who just had tremendous years, and I don't know if they can do it again. I think it's not very sustainable production. Gabriel Davis had 5 top 30 performances all year. Only one of them was inside the top 10. So he really was not very good this year at all. He was not consistent, did not have monster performances, just was okay. But then, of course, you saw the game where the Bills played the Chiefs. He had 4 touchdowns, over 200 yards receiving. I just think he's a guy that you need to sell high right now because I think the Bills are probably going to go get a running back, maybe a Breece Hall or something like that. I think they'll draft another receiver to come in and provide some, I just think, more firepower in the offense. And then you also have Stephon Diggs, who is clearly the wide receiver 1 there. So I think it's time to sell Gabriel Davis. I think you can get a haul back for him. Like, if you can get a first for him because someone's just so excited about his value, you absolutely have to do it. The final target that I need to talk about in this sell high edition of Run the League is Deebo Samuel. Okay, he was wide receiver 2 on the season, wide receiver 3 on average throughout the year. He was terrific. I mean, the guy does everything for the 49ers. He takes handoffs. He's kind of lined up in the slot, lines up outside. But there are a lot of factors that make me very nervous about Deebo. So the first one is injuries. And I kind of throw that one out there just as a disclaimer because he had injuries, and yes, he's had an injury history in the past, but you can't rely on that. Guys get hurt all the time in the NFL, so I'm not going to put too much stress on that, but these other issues, I absolutely am. So Jimmy Garoppolo loved him some Deebo Samuel and was throwing him the ball a ton, putting him in great situations to be successful, but next year, Jimmy G is not going to be their quarterback. Trey Lance is. And to me, I think that is worst case scenario for Deebo because Trey Lance is going to turn this team into even more of a running football team. And also the other factor that you have to keep in mind is Trey Lance might find a better connection with Brandon Ayuk or with George Kittle. And if Deebo Samuel is not the number 1 on this 49ers offense, then he's going to have some issues returning the value that he had this season. So if I could trade him for a T. Higgins and maybe a first or a second, I would do it. I absolutely would capitalize on the fact that he was wide receiver 2. And also, I think a lot of people love Deebo Samuel. I think he's a guy who's very polarizing. He looks so good when he's on the field. So I think someone may pay up for him. So like I said, T. Higgins in a first or T. Higgins in a second, I think I would do either to try to ship Deebo off. So For Run the League, this has been Grayson Grunhafer. Hopefully you enjoyed this buy low, sell high edition this week. And next week, we're going to be talking about the Super Bowl as the Bengals and Rams square off to try to win it all in the NFL. But for Run the League, this has been Grayson Grunhafer on NFL on 365 Sports.